Evening all, I'm going to have a Fischer 960 challenge match from the Kingscrusher cafe today. So I'm just going to accept it. So far I'm undefeated. I have been held to a draw though recently against actually Green Castle Block from another YouTube channel. He was the team captain and that was the only draw so far, and the others I've won on 960. So I'm just going to turn off ignore select spaces. Accept team captain. Edward, I can see your comments only. I'll just make sure. So I've mentioned I put the time on the cafe. I changed the topic basically, so 9:30 British summertime, which is GMT +1. Join it, Edward. And so if you see this in the cafe, you'll know that when the next one is. I might do it in advance, more like a schedule or something. Like I might set this in the morning now. I think these are getting very popular. The cafe is getting very popular. 68 people. I wouldn't have dreamt of this to start off with just a week or two ago. So an exceptionally popular cafe area within Chess Cube. And if you like the idea of some consultation games, the idea is not just move suggestions, but reasons. He wants to be blocked. Okay. How will we communicate though? Okay. Okay, just gotta negotiate this. Okay, are you sure? If this has been suggested on YouTube that I should block the captain as well, I can do this as well. So yeah, if we just go back to the cafe, then okay. There's also a private chat. Okay. Yeah. So I've got a private chat with the captain, and I'll just ignore. I wonder if that does the job. So I see him typing, but there's nothing being said. So okay, so the bishops are pointing actually across the centre, like in the recent game we just saw. Hypermodern bishops here across the centre, so the light and dark squares of the centre. The knights over here ready to hop over there from the left to the right or the left to the centre. King could castle, I suppose, with difficulty on the queen side, with ease on the king side. I think this move. I'll occupy the centre. I'm not going to play it too hypermodernish style. Do I have sound? Let's put the sound up a bit. Okay. So, what would be the plan here? After d4, maybe e3, c4, b3, knight c3, knight d3, g3. Move the bishop out, move the queen, try and castle. I think could play it like queen's game at the client. Mind you, DC the rooks, supposing it's attack on d4. I think e3 is safe. It opens up the queen on that diagonal. Okay, so e3. This c4 is such a good idea. c4 takes, maybe knight d6, and we're conceding some central control if that pawn takes. The king over here, like my king. It's getting the castle queenside, kingside. So alright, c4's been ruled out. Maybe just knight d3, just e5, f4, maybe b3, knight d2, c4. Maybe even f4, kind of stonewall. If e4's a bit vulnerable though. Not sure. f4's leaving a gaping hole there. But with the bishop here, it's going to take a long time to rig out of this pawn chain. Okay. So, what else can be observed here? Knight f4 puts a little bit of pressure on d5. g3 might become important as well as b3. So g3, if I'm going to play f4 and g3, that's weakening a lot of squares. I think, what about g4 to try and discourage f5? Does g4 have any other benefits? Maybe queen h3 later. g4 might want to play queen h3 anyway. Just against f5 it might be useful. h5. Maybe it doesn't matter. Quick c4, there's a pin actually as well. I'm going to play g4. There's a pin on d5, so it takes, this bishop takes a8. Takes, I'll have a long bishop on the diagonal, cutting across those central squares. The pawn's a little bit vulnerable to attack, I guess. So liberating moves c5 and e5 and f5 of course, but knight d2 or just c4 straight away maybe, put pressure. If e6, knight c3 like queen's game had declined. If c4 takes, bishop a8, c takes, queen takes. Say the bishop tries to be blocked in with c6. I don't know, the bishop would be blocked in. Queen can't use a6 or anything. c4 is that a cheeky move. What about just say c6, blocks in the bishop, e6 there's knight c3. I'm tempted now, especially with the knight not protecting c6 for the trapping the bishop. I'm just going to use this pin on d5. So a sort of natural move if it was a queen's game and declined, to put pressure on the occupation pawn in the centre d5. By the way, Richard Retter, yeah, he had another couple of wins at the very least in that New York tournament. So maybe we should have a look at those as well. I'll put pressure now with knight c3 on the d5 pawn. So this battle of the centres already adding some. I'm already adding some weight. What about knight f4 as well? If g5, maybe knight h5. If e5, I'll just take. Otherwise, I'm just putting lots of pressure on d5. This might be a good time for knight f4, but then c6, I've won a little bit of a strategic trump card. Bishop sort of blocked in compared to my bishop. Mind you, then d takes c would be on the cards. Maybe e4, I don't know. What would be the point of the knight on f4 here? No real targets here. There's dark square weaknesses. What about, I don't know, b3, just to give the option of the bishop's protected. Could try and fix a pawn with cd as well. Then knight f4 might have more effect. Also the semi-open c file against c7. There's no rook here against the e file, so I'm going to take. Does it release the tension though? What about c5? Whoa, well, I could castle on. I could play knight f4 with c6. c5 clearly gains some space, but maybe, I don't know, takes, bishop c3 or something. c5 or cd. What would lead to more exploitable weaknesses? c5 or cd here? Or is knight f4 worth considering? Takes, bishop a8, rook a8, queen g2. How does the black queen defend there? I don't know, that's difficult to defend against queen b7s. I'm going to go for it, knight f4. Let's invite this as a pawn set. In fact, there's always queen c4 as well. I could just take and queen c4. I want to weaken these light squares. Get rid of the light square protector, that bishop. Get into these light squares, b7, c6, a6. So these are entry points. Queen's ideally suited for coming in via a6. So I'll put a lot of pressure now on d5. Hopefully the team's feeling this pressure now on d5. If g5, that's the question. Do I sack a piece or something? Knight d5 for 2 pawns, ed, cd. Don't believe there's too much compensation there, but if knight h5, maybe f5. What would I do against g5? I don't know. Knight h5, f5. That would weaken a bit d5 a little bit more, so maybe cd would be more effective there. By the way, if someone speaks to you on the tab, it goes a slightly different colour of blue from the black, so that's how you know, like that's got a blue, so there's some new conversation in there. So it's not blue yet, there's nothing being said, so that's cool. Okay, so I've got very nice pressure on d5. So I'm keeping that tension going of the continual idea of c takes d5. Let's examine this idea. We say the term keeping the tension. So that was a classic example. It's caused the concession, you see, by keeping the tension. The bishop is now being voluntarily blocked in, so already it's done some damage. That simple act of delaying cd, more damage than the actual execution. So I think it ties in with Nimzowitsch. The threat is often stronger than the execution, this idea of keeping the tension. But I don't know, should I try and put more pressure on the centre? e4, the pawn's protected. I could do big knights come to d6, that would be mate if a knight got to d6. I'm tempted for e4. Why not? Try and extend the scope of all the pieces. d4 is protected. If it takes, there's also queen c4 again, maybe even knight e6. If it takes, there's knight e4 with immediate threats. Knight f5 is ruled out because of that pawn. Immediate threat of knight d6 looks unpleasant. Queen, I don't know, it's sort of developed at the moment. Do I need to displace it to queen h3 or queen d3? Just wait for, how does black solve this d5 problem? Still isn't properly solved, I think. Are they really going to release the pressure themselves now, with that bishop just voluntarily blocked in with dc? dc, queen c4, it's a comfortable position, surely. I can look forward to maybe queen a6s or d5. I can even try and castle kingside with just putting the king over here. I think I might have to move that bishop, I'm not sure. I'm not sure of the Fischer random casting rule, actually. That would be interesting to test. So a lot of pressure on d5 here. So yeah, I guess keeping the tension equates almost directly to Nimzowicz's, the hypermodern Nimzowitsch said, the threat is stronger than the execution. So what do you lose carrying out the threat to do the execution? You lose the possibility of timing the execution at the most appropriate moment, and also in trying to parry the potentially suspended threat, the opponent might actually do more damage to their position than the actual threat would have. So hence you get this idea that the threat is sometimes stronger than the execution. So I think that ties in with maintaining the tension. So was significant damage done by black playing c6 when I didn't play cd? Because that would have meant ed, the bishop would have been still blocked in, but not by the pawn, the c pawn. I mean, what is the damage of c6? It weakens d6, so that gives possibilities now for de, knight e4, knight d6. So damage has been done to the dark squares by black playing c6, by a suspended threat, basically. The threat stronger than the execution. Okay. Right, what is going on here? Tons of tension in the position. I have a possibility of just sacking a knight for 2 pawns, or just de, and this rook could face, the king could be kicked around. If bishop e5, that's probably more likely. de, bishop e5. Then again, maybe, I don't know, knight takes d5. Is that crazy? 2 big pawns. The king's still in the centre, so ed, queen e2. Interesting. Taking immediately is not as good because there'll be ED. So I think that poor knight's been targeted now. If knight e2, I don't know. Knight e2 keeps a lot of tension going without sacrificing anything. And if knight so knight e2, ed, knight d4, say c5, there might be knight b5 threatening, knight c7, knight d6 mating. So I don't know, knight e2 might be a good move because I have actually caused this d5 to be more under pressure now. But then knight e2, there's d takes c4. And then d5, I'm loosening the dark squares. So again, I think I'm going back to this p-sec idea, unless there's like bishop e5, knight d3, or maybe just ed, bishop f4, d takes c6, that loses a piece. I think this knight sack is attractive. I'm going to play it for a laugh. Because then queen e2, castle queenside, rook e1. I have my rooks right in the centre with the king over there. So I think knight takes d5 here, and I'm extending the scope of my bishop. So this bishop will only have, it will have to get back into the game as well. It will be a spectator kind of piece after knight takes d5. But h2 is a casualty, unless my king when castle protects h2. Mind you, then queen h6. I could be mated if I castle here quite quickly. So this is a problem. Bishop e5. It's it's a big problem. Knight d3, bishop h2 or something. Have I blown it? Knight. Okay, so knight takes d5 as a piece sack, or something else. Knight d3, dc, knight e5, knight e5 protects c4 and maybe comes to d3. Knight e2, there's bishop h2. But then, I don't know, rook g2 and then I take on d5. Knight e2, there's simply maybe d takes c4. The piece sack is coming in again as an idea. I think I'm tempted just to take on d5. I'm going to do it. It's only a game. Knight for 2 pawns, 1 pawn. But then queen e2 might be effective. Bishop's going to be better than this bishop. I'm hoping this will be a spectator bishop. So bishop h2, rook g2, bishop moves again. I'll take it this way. Just trying to get a better bishop than this one. Positional sack. Maybe there's f4. If this pawn is left, maybe f4. There's bishop h6 as well. No, queen e2 and knight e4. Knight b5 might be handy. Maybe just castling actually over on the queen side will bring the rook to d1. Actually, I could do that now. Try castle. Bishop's usefully protecting c3 here. So in fact, knight b5 might be on the cards, threatening knight c7 and a7. Mind you, bishop's on c7. So what about f4? Coming back to f4 just to protect the pawn. And queen h6 as g5. Bishop c3, bc. Double pawn's a little bit wretched. Take him off this bishop to get back into the game. And there's also knight c5, which looks painful. Oh dear. I think I need to move this. Otherwise bishop c3 is a major thing, and then the blockade looks powerful. Mind you, I don't know, the queen e2, pinning the knight. Also then they just want to take this pawn, bishop h2. mind you, again, f4, just kicking the bishop anyway. Looks dangerous. So what have I got for the piece? On the surface it doesn't look like a great deal, but the king's still in the centre. The king could actually castle in one move here. Why don't they just castle? Putting the king over the rook, that would just castle here. I suppose f4, bishop c3, bishop bc, knight c5. Have I got f5 there, just getting a bit of space, maybe threatening f6 at some point. So with castle f4, maybe I should just go for that. This bishop might have to come out slowly, or just keep protecting c3. So castle's f4. If bishop h2, rook g2, bishop moves back, queen e2. Bit of development speed, but they could castle then. And I've just lost my h2 pawn. Yes. And this, I don't know, knight b5 puts them in trouble after bishop h2, bishop g1, knight c7. Ooh, okay. Let's do this. c4 is protected anyway. Do they want to give up the dark square bishop? That's the question. There's also a possibility of f5. So bishop moves, queen e2, this bishop f4. So maybe f5 is actually takes. That's on g1. Okay, so say bishop d6, knight b5, say bishop c7, maybe knight b5 with the idea, or just king b1 with the idea of b3, just attacking the queen on the diagonal. If I play king b1, it will avoid bishop f4 being check. So king b1 as well. So are they going to take on c3? It would solve some problems for me, but create others. Also, is this d6 a potential threat? Right, attacking the rook. So if I play queen e2, bishop g1, what about d6? They'd have to defend the knight with something, and then I could take on g1. There's no interpose check, I just take. Isn't queen e2 and d6? I'll play that. Just tying that knight down, I hope. So bishop g1, d6, unless I've blundered horribly. I'm threatening a mate. Gets defended with, say, queen f6. Oh dear. What about knight e4 there? There's check. Whoops. This might not have been the hottest idea because of queen f6. Oh dear. d6, queen f6. So what do? Just rook g1 then? d6, queen f6. Hold on a sec. Yeah, queen f6. Because then I take. Then they take that pawn. Is that the end of the story there? Probably. Which is a shame. Also, knight e4 is queen f4. Maybe I'll just give up that exchange then. Try and get this bishop on the diagonal. Something like king b1, b3, knight e4, if possible. So king b1 would be a subtle little preparation. Also, I just want to get rook e1 in as well to keep the knight, to keep king in the centre, and keep the king in the centre. I'm glad to see the back of the dark square bishop because this one's not. It's a bit of a spectator. The other one was the more dangerous one. Constant threat of bishop c3 and knight c5 was painful to look at. That's a. Whoa, okay. It's threatened. Oh, giving up. Whoops, f4. Doesn't matter. king b1, bishop can accelerate on the diagonal. Also there's d6 anyway to factor in here now. So queen f4, king b1, it's all under control surely. King still trapped in the centre. There'll be d6 coming up. I think they're in trouble a little bit. I'm also spending a bit of time, so I'm optimistic. King b1, pawn stopping queen f5. Or is king c2 better? King c2, maybe king b1 then a3 and king a2. So what do they do now about e7 and d6 as a threat? Oh, the queen's on d6 anyway. They could castle queen e7. If they put rook in, I can just take both rooks. I want to play b3. Definitely I want to play b3, I think, at some point, given the chance. So first they're going to defend, surely, with, say queen f6, there's b3 though. So they can't still castle without losing the knight. Then I'll be threatening knight b5. Huge threat. Ah! They want to take that. Okay, okay. Yeah, I think they're in trouble. I think I've got the team in trouble already. Yeah. It was only an exchange sack or knight. It was only a knight sack and an exchange sack to get this position. Oh dear. Dynamism. Forget becoming a grandmaster. I think just become a dynamic, exciting player is my goal at the moment. This is, I think, an exciting game. I had Raymond Keene's book, Becoming the Grandmaster, as well as Kotov's Think Like Grandmaster. I'm not really sure nowadays. Well, I think I'll be very happy in a few years if I became a FIDE master still. But to play an exciting game like this, you know, you can be at any level and play an exciting game. And that's the cool thing about chess. So the king's stuck in the centre. You wouldn't normally get this in normal chess. Such a major issue at move 17. Team's given up its better bishop. It was defending those weak dark squares. This bishop is a bit of a spectator piece. Immediate tactical problem is difficult to solve. Queen d6, maybe knight b5, and then d6. Queen f6, maybe b3. Again, the queen's a big target. If castles, then queen e7, and if rook e8, then I just take. Oh, they're doing it anyway. So I think I'm just gonna, unless queen f1's gonna be painful here after rook e8, I'd have to return back to base. There's no g4 be dropping off. Mind you, if I can just get in b3, then queen f1, there'll be knight d1 check. But then how would I defend against queen takes d1? Okay, there's another alternative. So queen e7 is the sharper move, inviting rook e8. There's also the quieter move b3, so letting them move the knight. But then knight e4 looks like it's defended by the knight on d7 though. This might be my chance for queen to munch a lot of material. I think I'm going to have to take it. So I'm going to have to take both rooks and maybe return back to base. Rook e1. And this is queen h4. Yeah? There's queen h4 just to munch that knight and just get the piece back. Queen h4 or take both rooks. It's a nice option to have. If they just take on c4, I think b3. So I'm threatening queen d7 anyway at the moment. So if they give up both rooks, actually there's that bishop as well to munch. So I just take two rooks and bishop. That would be good trade for the queen, taking 4 pieces. So queen f1, I lose a piece back. King c2, option of both bishops to take. It's getting crazy, this variation. But in this position, okay, if they take that bishop, no, then they'll be taking that bishop after. I could just take both rooks and rook d1. that's probably the safer. Then queen g4, so big, so it's a big deal. b3. I think just taking both rooks if rook e8. Okay, so now b3, that luxury move to play just to open this bishop. It's beautiful as a possibility because now rook e8, so I can just take and knight e2 check from the bishop on a1. There's no queen e4 or queen f5 at the moment. Say b3, queen g4 though. What about b4? Just kick the knight, and there's knight d3. Then there's knight e4. Say I lose the rook, knight f6, king g7, knight h5, winning the queen. Yeah, I want to kick that knight, surely, with b4. So knight d3, knight e4, I think so. If queen c4, bc, I'm protecting c3 anyway. I hope I'm not getting embarrassingly mated though. Queen d2. So knight d3, knight e4, queen d2, knight f6, king g7. There's knight e8 double check. King g8. There isn't a queen sack or anything. I'll be threatened. Well, not immediately threatened by mate. So let's look at this in more detail. So knight d3, knight e4, queen d2, knight f6 check, king g7. There's also knight h5 as well as knight e8 double check. So knight e8 double check, king g8. So I've cut off in that position both rooks. There isn't queen f8, king takes, bishop g7. I think knight e4 is the logical move anyway now to invite queen d2. I'm not getting mated on b2, so it's not a big problem to play knight f6 and then just move the rook after, surely. Okay, so knight e4. There's no queen c1 mate. So queen d2 looks dangerous. So what can I do at minimum? Knight f6. There's knight h5. No, I don't know. Am I inviting a draw? Because this is dangerous, this queen and knight. Seems logical to coordinate knight and bishop here. If f5, knight f6 just takes on g7. Queen d2, knight f6, king g7. They can't really allow this, can they? I can't see a killer blow though in this position. Knight e8, king g8. Knight d7, check. King g8. Queen f8, rook f8, knight f6, king g7. Couldn't I just win the queen there with knight e4 check? Try and win the queen. On the discovered check on d2. If the queen lands on d2... What is this? I just realised queen d2. I just got knight takes d2 here. What is the problem here? Okay, there's no problem. There's no problem. Okay, so let's look at knight e1 now. Okay, after that nonsense. So knight e1, knight f6. King g7. There's knight h5 check. Discovered check, winning the queen. So there's no queen d2. Oh, what a muppet. Okay, so knight f6 here, and I'll just be threatening mate on g7. There'll be queen h6. I don't know. That looks... Is this anything... Isn't bishop f6 even stronger? Just threatening a mate. There's rook f7. So knight f6. Okay, rook f6, bishop f6, king, queen h6. There's g5. Just decoying. If queen f... it looks crushing. It looks absolutely crushing. I'll play it. So rook f6, bishop f6, queen h6, g5, queen f8. What about just in that position d6? And I'm threatening d7. I don't want to lose the rook. Very pleasant position to have. seems. So what is material anyway? I've got 3 bits. I'll get after. So one and another exchange. There's no mate in 1, which is good news. Like on C1. So I'm threatening a mate in 1. Rook C7, that doesn't look right. Just check maybe and bring the rook in. Rook E7 check. So Queen E8 is mate of Rook C7. Queen E8 mate. Rule that one out. Queen H6. Okay, so Queen H6. That's Queen E6 mate. Oh no, it's not mate. It's King F8, but that's mating surely. Bishop E7, King E8, Bishop D6. You know the standard. King goes there. Queen E7 mate. So Queen E6 will be mating if Queen H6. So I'm actually threatening massive threat of Queen E6. It's actually just picking up the rook anyway. So I'm actually Queen E6 threatening to win the rook. I'm also threatening mate. There's no major check. I think this is the end of the game. Oh. So isn't Queen E6 winning here anyway? Queen F7, Queen C8. If King F8, I don't know, just Bishop E7? Looks pretty crushing. Bishop E7, Queen can't take. Say the King goes to G7, Queen F6. I think Queen E6 is the only reasonable move here, because there's no Queen F7. So then I can have Bishop E7 next. So King G7, Queen F6, King G8. I don't know about Bishop D6, Queen C4. Still, I'm not sure here. Bishop. What about just Rook F1 here? Just simply Rook F1, threatening like all sorts of things. There's no threatening Bishop H8 mate actually. Rook F1. There's Knight F4. There'll be Bishop E5. The knight would be pinned to the king. So again, the threat is surely stronger than the execution. The threat of Bishop H8 mate. I'll just play that. I don't think there's any major checks. So the threat of Bishop H8 mate. No messing around with Bishop E7. Not needed. Queen moves, Queen takes C8 anyway, if Queen F7, Queen C8. It looks all over again. How is there a defence? This bishop has been a spectator throughout the whole game. This knight can't easily defend this against Bishop H8. Knight F4 is Bishop E5. Or isn't it even easier? Rook takes F4, Queen F4, Queen E7, King G8, Queen G7, mate. It looks to be all over. I think there's a message from the captain. Oh, it's understanding casting rules. Oh, maybe that was the take back thing. This looks pretty simple, this Rook F1. Okay. Can't see a defence myself. Let's work on this Knight F4 again. So Rook takes F4, maybe the simplest. Again, renewing the threat. Queen F4, just Queen E7, Queen G7, mate. No, I can't see it. Can't see how black can get out of this. There's no checks. Bishop's useless. The rook's blocked in. I think I'm just going to play Rook F4 here. Just decoy the queen away from E7. It's an interesting game. So rook e8, I guess. There's bishop. Oh, it's not mates because queen f4. Okay, bishop e7 is double check. And the game goes on. King g7. Oh, they've resigned. Okay, good game. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube. What was the team like? Okay. Thanks very much.